before, that what the Scopes trial does is it pits this agrarian community, Dayton, Ray County, against modernist ideas. And that's the city versus the country. This is agrarian ideals and mythologies, Eden-esque if you want, up against the vulgar city. That's still a theme. And you look even now in the state of Tennessee, money goes to building roads in rural counties, while the cities with all sorts of urban problems, well, they get what's left over, including universities, of course. That's one small way in which that agenda perpetuates itself. The city versus country theme is not new to Dayton, doesn't originate with Dayton, doesn't end with Dayton, but it's manifest quite well in Dayton. It's also, oddly enough, still celebrated in Dayton. And that is one that I always have to scratch my head over, because I guess I should interview people in Dayton sometime and ask them, why do you celebrate this? What makes this worthy of a celebration? Shouldn't we have flags at half-staff or a day of mourning instead of a carnival every year in July? I don't understand.
Yeah, go ahead.
There may be some Daytonians here, so I might hear real
You
quick.
must be, are you from Tennessee?
No, I am not.
Well, I'm not either, and I came down, my first trip was to Dayton, and I find it a cause for celebration, and that's my question. I want you to talk more about the celebration. I come at this more from the Mencken viewpoint, the journalistic viewpoint, coming down, going into the hills, finding a little revival meeting, finding snake holders, you know. I'd like you to comment on that national scene, because I do see it as a reason to celebrate, because they pulled one on everybody else. I must admit, the whole South, until Baker versus Carr, was controlled by the rural area. But once it was one person, one vote, you know, the urban groups got equal power, and we're doing all right now. But that whole thing that Dayton pulled off was something that the whole South suffered, because Mencken talked about the bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie. I mean, he hated anything below the Mason-Dixon line. He thought it was awful. He married a Southerner, a Marylander, but still, he had that prejudice. Darrow had that prejudice. But still, you know, now that I'm an adopted Southerner, I see it as a point of celebration, and I'd like you to bring that out a little bit more. More than the monkeys, just what happened, you know, with all the press that came down.
Well, the press coverage is an issue unto itself in many respects. And this is something that we only know after the fact, I believe. And if people in 1925 understood the way the press works, the way we understand now how the press works, I think they would have seen the problem. Even now, I think many people fail to appreciate the fact that the fundamentalist cause is doomed from the beginning when it comes to press coverage. That's not because the press is biased about it. It's because it's the way the press covers things. Stop and think about what you've got here. You've got an argument about something scientific. What is science? It's empirical in nature. You collect facts and data. It's in a courtroom. What does a courtroom do? You deal in facts and data. And it's being covered by the press. What does the press do? Facts and data. What's on the other side? Faith. There's the problem. There's an inherent bias in the press for the scientific argument because it's logical, it's linear, and it's factual. It's much easier to present that than it is a testament of faith. That's kind of the structuralist argument about the reason for the bias. But it is there. I don't know how a newspaper reporter would come into religion, science. We'll just give them equal time. It'll be balanced coverage. I don't know how you could do that, because you've got to write in a fashion that presupposes the validity of factual information. You can't do that with a personal testimony of faith, because it's not verifiable in a scientific sense of the word. I think I answered your question.
Well, I want to know more about the carnival atmosphere.
Well, that's... Well, it was. We had people in Dayton, not only the Dayton merchants, but people were coming from a long way off to set up shop for the brief time the trial lasted in Dayton. Dayton was making a carnival of it. And I emphasize that because they didn't see it as a trial of any substance. They saw it as simply an opportunity to pump a few dollars into that faltering economy. I wonder if that isn't still the case. That'll get me a few letters, won't it? But there again, I'm baffled as to what's to celebrate.
I think this myself, that one of the things about the Scopes trial that gives an image to the state and maybe to the South as a whole to a great extent is the idea that levels of education and levels of knowledge are lower here, and we have, you know, people who are more ignorant and so forth, and that is the one thing that hurts the image of Tennessee. And I think it's even true today, because you talk about here in Nashville we have a pro football team, and of course we're trying to promote the city as being, you know, in a league with all the other sophisticated cities that have pro football teams. And when we get our television coverage, there's a tendency to think that somehow, you know, we're different in some way, not as sophisticated, not as, and of course the television coverage, of course, whenever it comes and they cover the team, they also feature the city. They'll show scenes from the city and so forth. And I think some of us thought that maybe Dennis Miller was putting us down a little bit the last time, and you know, that we're kind of rabid football fans, rednecks, and you know, so forth.
Mencken would probably agree. Well, to some extent, what you see here is yet more the legacy of Bryan. Now, again, we have to back up and appreciate Bryan for the historical figure that he is. He's a populist at heart. And part of his ideology was egalitarianism. That to the extent that he really genuinely believed that a community should dictate what's taught in the schools, that's local control, and that if the local community said, we don't want evolution in the schools, that's it. Then evolution won't be in the schools. If we want the Bible taught in schools, and of course this is before all of these Supreme Court cases come along after World War II and in the 60s especially, then that's it. This is the kind of rather radical egalitarianism that's at the heart of what Bryan's talking about. You see that to this day in this state, a leveling, that nothing stands out, but everything will be the same. There's a suit now, I believe, winding its way through concerning teacher pay, that teachers in rural areas should make the same thing as teachers in metropolitan areas. There again, egalitarianism. The proposal was floated, I guess it's been nearly a decade ago, that that the state should pump a lot of money into one university. It should be a stellar one. It should stand out. It was shouted down fairly convincingly because, you know, we don't want to do that. We don't want to have one university up here and the others here. People of Tennessee don't want that, was much of the argument. They may not. But again, the Bryan legacy, that community dictates idea, and egalitarian. It is rabidly egalitarian. There's no elitism about it. And so when you're really at heart very anti-elitist, I think that ultimately is going to affect intellectual institutions and educational institutions. Someone has to know more than someone else in order to teach.